Software engineers, a job that's usually known to pay really high salaries ranging from 10, 15 lakhs per annum to God knows how much. A job that can make you the CEO of a company like Google or the ex-CEO of a company like Twitter, which frankly isn't the worst thing in the world considering you get an exit package like this. An industry that's been growing constantly for the past 10 years and it seems like there's nothing that can stop it. But wait, there are some dark sides to working in the software development industry, and in this video we'll be discussing exactly that. Being an engineer who interned at Amazon, worked in the finance industry for a year, then did some freelancing and eventually got a 3.5 CR offer from a US based company remotely from India. If you haven't checked that video out, by the way, you can click at the top left corner to reach it. Now let me tell you something people on YouTube rarely talk about: the dark side of working in the software development industry. The first and probably the most important one is some serious health issues. This is highly subjective but happens very often considering we're working almost 8 hours a day and our job is primarily sitting down on a chair in a very weird posture. If you maintain this posture over years, or if you're drinking, 5 to 10 cups of coffee every day, it's very easy to land into the hospital. This is something that's happened to me. I've been one of those jerks who did not listen to this fairly obvious advice and landed up with a slip disc. Slip disc, lower body pain, obesity, sugar, and multiple deficiencies are fairly common in the tech industry, and you can avoid these if you take some really basic steps. Make sure you're not sitting in a very bad posture. I try to do that myself from time to time. If you can, maybe invest in an ergonomic chair, especially if you're working from home, and maybe get a standing desk. You can find some cheap ones on Amazon that you'll have to deliver through your hand, and then some expensive ones that you can press a button and it'll stand up for you. Try getting some sun throughout the day, maybe work out if you can, and try to avoid too much caffeine. These little steps can save you lakhs in hospital bills. Trust me, I've been there. Always remember, professional goals are temporary, but your personal loss is permanent. With that, let me be a complete hypocrite and get a coffee. Okay, next up, super slow work. This is highly subjective again. It depends on what team you're in and sometimes what company you're in. Most probably this will not be a problem in a startup, but if you're working in a big company and if you don't land in the right team, it might happen that you don't have any work all day, or your day is extremely slow. You might have worked really hard to get this job, worked on a great open source profile, maybe cracked the best company out there, but if you land in the wrong team, your learning curve as well as the contributions that you're making to the company might slow down very quickly. This might seem like you've cracked the lottery, but you're getting paid for doing no work, but it catches up to you very quickly. As a few years pass by, you'll realize you lagged behind a lot in your learning, which will in the long term have an impact on your career, the amount of money that you're making, so on and so forth. So if it does happen that you're not in the right team, maybe talk to your manager, try making a switch internally, and if that doesn't do it, just change your company. Your learning is much more important than your earning, especially in the first few years of your career. So make sure you keep that in mind. Next up, extreme peer pressure. So this happens right out of college. When you've recently joined a company, most probably a lot of your peers who are from the same college, your batchmates, are working in the same company, and everyone has different goals. Some of them are trying to go for their masters, some of them are preparing for another job switch, some of them might be preparing for UPSC, so on and so forth. So it's very hard to know what's the right path to follow here, right? Also, you might have peers you have to compete with. This usually does not happen in most companies, but a lot of times there's cutthroat competitions in a few companies. I've heard Amazon has a big culture around this, where you're sort of competing with your peers, which in my personal opinion is not the best way to build a company, but to each their own. And when that happens, if your peer is working 12 hours a day, you might be tempted to do the same. And based on what company you're in, that might be the right or the wrong thing to do. In my personal opinion, try to have an open mind. Be as friendly as you can and share as much as you can with your peers and expect the same from them, hopefully. The best companies and the best software developers are made through collaboration. So try to have healthy discussions around what your peers are working on. Make sure you know what the industry standard is for your salary. Talk to friends who have recently made switches, what kind of compensation jumps they got, and try to take this whole negative concept around peer pressure into a positive thing that you as a group can work around. A lot of switches that I have made in my career, I never would have made them if I did not know a friend who was working in that company, who showed me what kind of money they're making or what kind of work they're doing on a day-to-day basis. A lot of times, a small discussion with your friend can have a butterfly effect in your career. And if you don't have that friend, there's a link in the description to a newsletter. We regularly send out salary updates. So if you'd like to know what your peers are earning, and if you'd like to help others out and contribute your salary completely anonymously, make sure you click the link in the description and join the newsletter. With that, let's move to the next point. The next point is having no life. So this, luckily, big tech tries to make sure you have a good life. You have gyms, sometimes even masseuses and massage parlors inside the company, sleeping rooms and regular parties, year-end parties or like quarterly parties and offsites. This becomes a problem when you start freelancing or working remotely for maybe more than one client. Personally, I was working for 3 to 4 clients at some point in my freelancing career. And what ends up happening then is you're working close to 80 to 100 hours a week. That's not the best lifestyle to follow, and it's definitely not sustainable. But I remember when I was working in a big company like Amazon, whenever there were big issues, people would stay at the office for like 3-4 days, put their beds there and try to fix it. For the same reason, working in tech is a double-edged sword. Sometimes you might get weeks where you're not working at all, but sometimes you have to work like 80 to 100 hours a week. And if you're the kind of person who wants a decent work-life balance, which we all should, there might be days or weeks sometimes where you don't get that. There is a silver line here though. Whenever this happens, usually companies compensate you for your time either through a promotion or through a year-end bonus. So it's not all wasted effort. The fifth point is important. It's called international exploitation. So let's say you're working in India and you got an offer from a company either in Canada, UK, Singapore, or Germany. These are the usual common countries that people switch to directly from India without going for a master's. It might happen that you're not getting paid as much as people of your level in that country are getting paid. Personally for me, when I was working at Goldman Sachs, I was making close to 35 lakh per annum, and I got an offer from a company in Singapore. They were offering me around 75,000 Singapore dollars, which is close to 45 lakh rupees. So even though it felt like a decent jump of around 12 lakh rupees per annum, if you compare the purchasing power parity and what my peers would be making in that country, it was actually really low. And the pitch of the HR was that we're making you move to a new country and hence you're not being compensated well because you won't get this opportunity elsewhere. So disguising an opportunity by paying you less is not the best way to start your career in a company. So if you're thinking of moving out, either negotiate really hard, or if you don't do that, make sure your visa does not depend on your employment. What I mean by that is once you land into that company, into that country, make sure you're allowed to switch companies without any problem from your previous employer, and make sure you're not signing any paper that prevents you from doing that. This is also sort of a problem for H1B workers, although it's not as bad, but exploitation is very common in big tech because if you don't get a job for a certain period of time in the US when you're in an H1B, you'll have to leave the country, and hence there's a lot of pressure on software developers, which makes them take up lowball offers, even though their counterparts are getting paid much more. Lastly, and this is probably the most important thing, there are rapid changes happening in this industry. There's always a new technology that comes out there. In the past few years, industries like machine learning, AI, Web3 have grown very rapidly, and it might feel like you're falling behind as time goes by, but know that there are not a lot of people working on these niche industries. That opens up two big points here. One, if you start working in one of these industries, and what I mean by that is you start learning the core competencies allowed for starting to work in this industry. For example, in Web3, if you become a smart contract engineer, there are not a lot of people who are doing this. There's a lot of money being pumped into these companies, and hence you can negotiate extremely high. In fact, I personally worked in a very niche industry for almost a year, and that's what helped me negotiate a better offer because not a lot of people around the world were able to do it. That's also very helpful if you're looking for a remote job because you can differentiate yourself from the crowd if you're, let's say, a smart contract engineer versus if you're a React developer. There are a lot of React developers out there, and hence a company might feel slightly weird hiring someone from India since they can find talent in the US, but there are not a lot of ML engineers out there, and hence the company might be open to an interview and even hiring you remotely if you're very good in one of these niche technologies that not a lot of people are. Also, don't feel bad if you're not good in any of these niche technologies. A basic software developer, front end, back end, should be getting a decent salary. There are a lot of founders out there who will pull out compensation numbers out of their asses and make you feel like React is a very common skill and can be easily hired for, but there is a shortage of software developers and hence you can negotiate a better salary. Make sure whenever you're applying, especially to a startup, you're not getting exploited for the salary that they're paying you. Trust me, there are not a lot of good software developers out there. As long as you're a good one, you will get paid top dollar for it. Now, I know this video might feel very harsh since this was about the dark side of software development, but I think throughout the video, you can see the pros outweigh the cons by a lot if you're working in tech. As long as you're not giving up on your dream job and you have the motivation and the right set of skills, you will make a good software developer. And this opinion comes from a lot of my personal experience, the companies that I've applied to, the kind of health issues that I've faced. So there might be more cons, there might be more pros. It's on you to decide whether or not you want to get into this industry. But most people that have, including me, have not regretted it. With that, I'll plug the newsletter again. The link is in the description. If you want to know what your peers are making or if you'd like to contribute, feel free to join the newsletter. And with that, let's end the video. I'll see you in the next one.